What I've got here is a different kind of sanding disc that I bought. Actually, I bought a full box of them. And as you can see, it's quite torn up and there are other problems with it. And I go over that in the build article that goes along with this. I recommend reading it if you want to know all of the ins and outs as to why I'm not recommending these discs. And the link to that, of course, is in the description. So rather than send them back, which is something that I really don't like to do because it's usually more hassle than it's worth, I decided to make a sanding block that works with this size disc. And then as an added bonus, I can use it with the other 6-inch discs that I've already got. The good ones, that is. And to get started on that, I cut out a scrap of 1/2-inch plywood and rounded over the ends. And here I'm drilling a hole in the middle for the bolt. I also need to drill a countersink so that the head won't be sticking out. The next part is what clamps down on the edges of the sanding disc to hold it in place on the sander. And I've got a scrap of 1/4-inch plywood that I can use for that. And again, I need to drill a hole in the center of this as well. For the handle, I'm just going to use a piece of 2x2 that I have sitting right here and cut that to length on the miter saw. I need to make a recess in the handle for the knob that will tighten the parts together and lock the sandpaper in place. And to do that, I've got a 1 3/8-inch Forstner bit in my drill press. And I'm going to drill down into the middle of the handle a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. These cuts that I'm making here will give me access to the knob so I can actually turn it with my fingers. The rest of the wood in between these cuts will be removed later. And while I have the saw set to 45 degrees, I might as well knock off the corners as well. And then it's back over to the table saw where I'm rigging up a quick and dirty jig to cut a cove into each side of the handle to improve the grip. Next, I'm going to mix up some epoxy to glue in the bolt, and I'm going to use that epoxy to fill in the screw hole as well. I don't want it to dip or depression in the middle of the sanding block. I want it to be perfectly flush. And to keep the epoxy in while I continue to work on it, I'm going to put a strip of packing tape over it, and that'll keep it flat and stop it from leaking out. I'm going to use the rest of the epoxy to glue on the handle, and then I also need to add blocks on the ends, and what these do is they keep the handle lined up. And while I'm waiting for the epoxy to set up on that, I can start making the knob. I've got my compact compass to lay out the circle on a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and then I can drill a 5/16-inch hole through that, and what that's for is the T-nut that I'm going to press in using my wooden vise. Unfortunately, my vise is still not clamped down to the workbench, so it's kind of moving all over the place. After the T-nut was pressed in, I cut it out on the bandsaw, and then I brought it over to my homemade built disc sander to smooth out the curve and slightly chamfer the edge. Normally I wouldn't paint a project like this, but I thought I would make an exception for this one. But looking up inside my paint cabinet, I can see I'm pretty limited with the paint colors I have. I'll have to restock. So rather than go with one color, I went with two, and I sprayed the handle blue, and I sprayed the knob and the base this aluminum color. And then to improve the durability, I sprayed on a couple of coats of clear. And then after that was dry, I brought it in, put a sanding disc in, and tried it out. If you're interested in making one of these for yourself, the dimensions are in the build article on my website. The link is in the description.